Welcome back to Open House. I'm Susan Ng, together with Peh Fen Ning from 99.co. So we talked about a new launch before the break, and so now if you are thinking of buying a new launch, and then there are those of you who are thinking of buying resale property, we want to talk to you about some of the key considerations you have to keep in mind, some of the pros and the cons. And so we're joined in this conversation by Justin Quek, who is a Deputy CEO of Orange Tea and Thai. Justin, thank you very much for joining us today.
Hello, ladies. A pleasure to be here.
Pleasure to have you on with us. Justin, when buyers are in the market to purchase property, they will have the option, right? So you decide you want to buy something new, or you decide, well, you need to move in rather quickly, so maybe resale property, it might be something I would go for. But there are key factors that we must consider when deciding what is the most suitable option for ourselves. So talk to us about this. Highlight those factors for us, please.
Sure thing, Susan. Thank you once again for allowing me to be on this program. This is actually a topic that's really close to heart because I'm in the midst of also organizing my own property and also thinking about this, right?
Okay, so you've got to share your personal thoughts with us as well.
A little bit of that, yeah.
All right.
I mean, it's a common question.
Yes.
You know, all of us, we are pretty much in the same journey in Singapore, right? The first thing to acknowledge is that we are very lucky in Singapore that there is a diversity of property segments for us to consider, whether it's new sale, resale, even within the HDB, you've got your BTO, you've got your resale. So one thing we must acknowledge in Singapore is the privilege of what we call mobility, the ability to move from different classes and segments of real estate, right? So it's very important for us to be very clear-headed about what we're trying to achieve because there's actually quite a bit of choice. And so in terms of choosing between, say, a new launch and a resale property, perhaps I think one of the biggest things to always really think about, the first thing is timeline. Right, like you rightfully mentioned already, in this case, I had a client as well recently who wanted to get into a new launch, and he's currently renting, you see. So he was initially thinking, this new launch looks really exciting. I think I really want to get into it. And he says, but I also like this resale property. What should I choose? I said, let's take a look at the timeline and do a simple mathematical calculation. If you were to continue renting this place for the next 4 years while waiting for your new launch to be ready, let's equate that to dollar value. And when he looked at that number, he said, okay, I think I'm just going to go into resale. It's actually quite a straightforward equation when you think about it in terms of time, because time is cost after all. So it really depends on what you're after and what your situation is at the moment as well, right? If it is your first home, you are currently staying with your parents, or you've got alternative housing where the cost is not so heavily incurred for your lodging for the next few years while waiting for your new launch to be ready, then that might be a very plausible, reasonable proposition for you in looking at new launches, right? So timeline is one of them. The second thing being investment opportunity and objectives. With resale properties have also shown to show growth, after a period of time, but the acceleration is never quite as steep as a new launch. I mean, if you just take a look at a very simple figure, right, at the last 10 years, if we look at the resale market versus the new launch market, you will see that let's say sometime in 2013, 2012, people who actually bought into the resale market, today, they probably would have made about maybe 37% gains. Whereas people who actually bought into new launches in 2012, 2013, today might be sitting on over 100% profit. So the acceleration is quite a bit greater in terms of a new launch. And there are a few reasons for that. We can explore that later, right? So investment objectives also very important, right? Because are you after it for rental yield? Are you after it for actually capital appreciation? In the simplistics of answering this question, you can see capital appreciation. New launches show a much stronger case. And the last point being, of course, space planning. If you know that new launches today, because of expensive land and the cost of building is also increasing, developers have little choice but to, of course, also start to shrink the sizes of the units. So if space planning is a priority for you, some people would much prefer to go for an older development where you get a little bit more bang for your buck in terms of the space. Having said that, if you realize also some of the older developments in the resale market might have been built over an era where there were a lot of bay windows and wasted spaces, so they may not even be as efficient as the ones built today, even though they are smaller. So these are, I think, top of the mind 3 considerations that people really have to think about when they are looking between resale or new launches.
So it's all about doing your homework, especially the math of about your finances, and also being forward thinking about how you're going to utilize the space in your home in the future. Justin, how about from the perspective of the type of buyers? Usually when we look into buyer segments, there's two types. There's the owner-occupiers and there's the pure investors. What are the pros and cons for them for buying a new launch versus a resale?
Okay, great question. Very nice and simplified into two different categories. So if you're talking about investors, right? Investors, the most important thing is how hard is my cash working for me, right? Because I'm not living there, so there's no utility in any sense of the word at all. Whereas in our own stay proposition, you can say, I'm just staying here, I've still got a roof over my head. So the investment side may not be so important to me. Now, in buying a new launch, there are a few advantages. Firstly is, of course, because of progressive payment schedule in Singapore, there is a defrayment of costs involved. Up to the days where you collect your keys, your bank disbursement is actually just approximately about maybe 50% or so only. So you're only paying half the mortgage all the way for the next couple of years until the building is completed. Whereas if you were to get into a resale property right on today, in 3 months' time when the property is completed, you take on the full disbursement of the bank loan, which means you have to make sure that there is somebody already staying inside the property to help you to defray the cost of your monthly mortgage, especially if it is an investment property. Because again, if you do the simple mathematics, say if your monthly mortgage is $5,000-$6,000 per month, having the property sit empty for 2 to 3 months already brings down quite a bit of your equity, because you're actually spending money that's a bit unnecessary. You're not even staying there to use it, so there's no way of saying that, oh, that's money that I'm just spending for my own utility. Because when it's a rental property, you need to have it rented out. The thing about, of course, the counter argument to that for resale properties is, of course, when you get your keys in 3 months' time, straight away you get cash flow to cover your mortgage, provided you buy a property that is easily rented out, or you happen to buy a resale property that already actually has a current tenancy going on, and is sustained in your new ownership of it as well, and the tenant continues to pay. So basically, hardly any money out of the bank throughout the process. Now, this is in terms of holding the property. One benefit, of course, flying into new launches today, specifically in this environment where interest rates are higher, again, going back to what I was saying earlier on, where your disbursement is not a full disbursement in buying a brand new launch. So this half disbursement or so allows you to actually mitigate a little bit of that risk factor in terms of interest rates today. Because if you're going to buy a resale property today, you're going to hedge yourself in at, say, 4% interest rates for the next 2 to 3 years. And that's based on the full disbursement. Whereas if you buy a new launch today, you're going to be hedging that in based on maybe about 50% to 60% only of the loan. So that helps you to actually take away a little bit of that interest rate kind of premium that you'll be paying in a high interest rate environment today.
So there's actually quite a lot of things to consider, isn't it, Justin?
Yes.
I mean, yeah, you got to weigh the pros and cons, right, of the various decisions you must make. It's not as easy as saying, okay, well, I need to move quick, so I'll take this. So when we come back from the break, we want to talk about the decision-making process, actually, for potential buyers, and look at price differentials and things like factor in lease decay. How does this affect our decision? Our conversation with Justin Quek, Deputy CEO of Orange Tea and Thai, will continue after the news break. Stay with us. Thank you for staying with us here on Open House. So with Peh Fen Ning from 99.co, I'm Susan Ng, and we are joined by Justin Quek, Deputy CEO of Orange Tea and Thai. Our conversation today revolves the question of whether, if we're looking for a new home, whether we should head towards a resale property or whether or not we should buy a new launch. And as we've heard from Justin, there are quite a number of things to consider, Ning.
Yes, so Justin, we're talking about prices now. Everything else being equal, a brand new property usually comes with a significant price premium compared to a resale property, and this is especially more so now than before. Now, how should the price differentials between the new launch and the resale properties affect the decision-making process for potential buyers?
Thank you, Ning. I think Singaporeans are very savvy, so I would say that generally we are quite price savvy as well. So the only way to always understand price is actually to understand price context, right? What are you really comparing the prices to? Occasionally we have some clients who come in and say, oh, this price is way beyond what I ever imagined. But this client might have bought his house the last time 20, 30 years ago, and he does not understand what the price context is today. So we must be very clear-headed as well about what we are really comparing ourselves to, right? The first thing to really understand, sometimes when you talk about significant price premium, usually that is more so on the price per square foot basis, where you will see likely a new launch in the same area going for about, say, 2004, and then a neighboring property going for a resale property, maybe 15 years old or so, going for maybe about 2,000 per square foot. So there's a 400 per square foot differential. But again, price context is very important for us to understand, because now you're talking about a second-hand good versus a brand new good. That's number one. Number two is you also have to realize, I always remind people that when you go to a bank to borrow money, the banker never says to you, hey Ning, I'm going to loan you $2,000 per square foot. They will say, hey Ning, I'm going to loan you $2 million. So for you to deploy the $2.4 or $2.5 million after that is completely your choice. You could possibly go to the resale property and pay maybe 2,000 per square foot and get a slightly larger space. Or actually, if you never realize, quantum is the one that matters more, because the brand new launch, which has a smaller unit with a higher PSF, might actually end up being the same price as the resale property in the area today. So for instance, if you go into a development today and you see it's brand new, they're launching it this weekend, you pay say about 2.4 million for a 3-bedroom, brand new, and then you look next door where there's a 15-year-old property that's going for like 2,000 per square foot, but because it's not a 1,000 square feet 3-bedroom, maybe it's a 1,200 square feet 3-bedroom. Based on the differential PSF, quantum price actually ends up being almost the same. So as a buyer today, you actually have the choice to decide whether you want something new or something older and get a little bit more space or more bang for your buck, right? So this is, I think, how some simple method of really looking at the difference in terms of the premium that you're paying for. You really need to understand, like I said, be clear-headed again about, what you are after. If space is more important for you, then maybe the newness of the project may not be that important to you. You must prioritize it because at the end of the day, it's you have to choose.
No, yeah. And it's a big ticket item you're buying, isn't it, Justin? As we always say, your home would be the biggest ticket item that you could be purchasing in a lifetime. And certainly price is just one of those components. How about this, lease decay? How should buyers actually factor this into their decisions? See, because you now have also on the market older freehold property, and then you're looking at all the new shiny launches that are on the market. So how do we work this out? How do we look at this and price and then make a decision?
Okay, if you're speaking about lease decay would usually affect more of the older 99-year-old properties than would be the freehold ones, okay? So if you're talking about the older 99-year-old properties, NUS came out with this table many, many years ago called the Ballas table, and there's a theoretical lease decay model to look at. But one thing that model, I think, didn't really take into consideration is the increase in land prices. Right? Yes. Because if you look at lease decay purely at all things constant, then obviously there'll be a decay along the way. But if you were to look at some properties today, say for instance like Bayshore Park, 30 years into the market already, Laguna Park, 30 over years in the market already, they are worth probably 5 to 10 times more than they were when they first launched years ago, despite them being quite deep into their leases already. Same for even some Tiong Bahru conservation flats there as well. Same story as well, right? So lease decay, to be honest, if we look at it objectively, in terms of prices going down, it is a bit hard in the sense where Singapore land prices are only in one trajectory, which is upwards. However, having said that, there are some detriments of a property that's deep into the lease that will affect you as a buyer, such as financing, because banks may not be able to finance you when the property has hit a certain age. So that becomes a structural issue for you as a buyer. Now, even if for you say, oh no, I'm fine, I don't need any bank financing, I'm okay to buy it with full cash. But very often I need to remind people when they're buying into property, the only time that you actually make money or able to celebrate your property beyond living there is when you can actually sell it. So if you're going to have bank financing become a structural issue down the road, then the selling portion will become a little bit of a challenge for you. And that is something that you need to be very mindful of when entering the market to look into these properties. It's very easy to be charmed by the old charm of space, layouts and all that. Yeah, but if you are somebody using this as a stepping board or, as a stepping stone to your next property to upgrade, I think this is something that's very important for you to consider in terms of the resaleability of the property down the road.
Yes. So now let's talk about the appreciation potential then, since we're talking about reselling it down the road. You mentioned earlier at the start that new launches tend to appreciate faster than the resale properties. Now, explain to us more about this. What are the factors that actually influence the appreciation potential?
Sure. So in this case, I usually tell people there are two levels of defense. I think when buying a property, especially in this dynamic market today, being a bit defensive is important as well, right? You want to be offensive and make money, that's one thing. That one, you need a confluence of factors to help you down the road. And usually, in terms of just waiting it out, real estate over the mid to long term will always gain you some appreciation. But when you buy something, say a new launch today, you need to understand these two levels of defense. And these two levels of defense as a starting point. One is the baseline pricing on launch day. You see, say today, if you were to go in the market and buy a resale property, say you buy the sale at Marina Bay, and today, say you pay about 2,000 per square foot, and you might say that's very reasonable considering that OCR properties are already sometimes costing in above 2,000, and even, in fact, RCR properties are now costing 2,005 PSF on average. The thing is, if you study the history of the sale at Marina Bay, when it was first launched, there were people buying it at $800 to $900 per square foot. And some of them might still be holding on to it today. So say next year things get really bad and they want to cash out. These people who bought it at $900 per square foot can still sell at $1,800 per square foot and make double their money. Whereas you bought it this year at $2,000 per square foot, you probably would be suffering a little bit of loss. So baseline pricing is important. Now, the difference in a new launch is everybody comes in on day one to buy. They all pretty much buy at the same baseline pricing. So say the average price for, let's say, a certain property is $2,004 per square foot. Most of the buyers will come in on day one and they will hedge themselves in at $2,004. So nobody in the right mind or with sound judgment would want to sell their property for anything less than that. In fact, most of the people who buy new launches would be expecting a price premium in 3 years down the road before they collect their keys. So your neighbors basically help you to have some level of defense in terms of protecting the pricing. That's number one. The second level of defense actually comes from the developer. The developer today only has 5 years to sell, and sometimes when the property is very hot, what they do is they stage the launch progressively. They will only launch maybe 50% of the units on day one, and along the way they will naturally release more units for sale, especially for those that sell really well. And of course, along the way in the 4-year timeline of building and construction, the developers also have the tendency to try to prime the prices up along the way, really rewarding the people who bought on day one. So by the time you collect your keys, there's already two artificial barriers and baseline to protect your pricing, right? And then of course, the third one is when you collect your keys, and at that point in time, when people are in the market looking for properties, I'm sure you know as well, nowadays when you go and look at a resale property, if you happen to go and look at a place which is really messy, the existing vendor didn't keep it well, and then you go and see a brand new launch, everything is spanking new, it's so easy again to be caught up with that, and the new facilities, the 4 swimming pools and things like that. So with the two levels of defense, then comes ultimately upon TOP when you actually see the finished product, and that's when people really swarm in to say, I can actually buy this to stay, and that's when more appreciation comes in. Versus the resale, where if you buy it today, there's not going to be much structural changes to it, right? There's no developer helping you to prime the prices up. There is no monopoly of residents there gathering together to say, okay, from now on, we're not going to sell at anything less than 2,004 per square foot. And there is no brand new potential of the thing coming into, collecting keys and walking in the new house unless you guys say, let's spend, 1 million, 2 million to refurbish our common areas, change the lifts, change the garden and stuff like that. So without all these things in mind, you realize now why actually new launches do have a better potential for capital appreciation based on these 3 points. The 2 levels of defense, and of course the qualitative aspect of going into a new property when the keys are ready.
I really do appreciate your insights, Ning, and I do. And they're very detailed and very comprehensive indeed. Hopefully, our listeners would have gained by your comments and will put some of the things you've said into practice when they have to make these decisions eventually. Justin, I want to thank you very much for making time to talk to us today.
My pleasure, Susan and Ning.
Thank you. Justin Quek is Deputy CEO of Orange Tea and Thai, talking to us about the pros and cons of purchasing a new launch or resale property. Well, that's it for this week on Open House. You can find more property news and reviews on www.99.co. And if you've missed an episode or if you want to listen to again, Open House podcasts are available on the Me Listen app. I'm Susan Ng, together with Peh Fen Ning from 99.co. Thank you very much for joining us today, and have a wonderful weekend.